In this video, I'm going to be going over a couple problems from factoring exercise A. Now guys, up until this point, we've learned two different methods for factoring trinomials. We've learned the grouping method and we've learned the bottoms-up method. Now after going over both, I've noticed that most of you prefer to use the bottoms-up method, as do I. So for this video, I'm going to go ahead and use the bottoms-up method to go over these problems. So we're going to go ahead and start off by looking at number 7. So number 7, we have 18y squared plus 9y minus 5. Now remember, the first step whenever you are factoring a trinomial is to check to see if there is a GCF. So we check for a GCF in our calculator by pressing menu 2-5. Now because this is a trinomial, we have to press menu 2-5 2 times. So in our innermost set of parentheses, we're going to go ahead and type in 18, 9. We're going to close that first set of parentheses and then put comma -5 for our last term. Pressing enter, we get back a GCF of 1. So that means there is no GCF. So then I can move on to my next step, which is to slide and multiply. So here I'm going to multiply 18 times 5. Now, when I multiply 18 times 5, I end up getting back 90. So now I want to find factor pairs for 90. So, guys, the bigger your number gets, the more factors there are, and it's best to always check what those factors are in your graphs. So we're going to go ahead and type in 90 divided by x, press enter, and then Control T. So listing out my factors, we have 1 times 90, we have 2 times 45, we have 3 times 30. Continuing on, we have 5 times 18, we have 6 times 15, and then our last factor pair is going to be 9 times 10. So now that we have our factor pairs listed out, we want to go ahead and pay attention to the sign in front of C. Since this is negative, this means I'm looking for the two factors that subtract to give me 9, which are going to be 6 and 15. Now, remember, because you subtracted, this also means that your signs should be different. One should be positive, one should be negative. So we want to go ahead and pay attention to our middle term now to determine which factor is positive and which factor is negative. So I want to make 6 and 15 give me a positive 9y. So if I want to make 6 and 15 give me a positive 9y, that means that this plus sign needs to go to the 15. It needs to go to our larger factor. The opposite factor gets the opposite sign. So now I'm going to go ahead and set up 2 sets of parentheses. Y will go at the beginning of both. And I am substituting in -6 and a positive 15. Now from here, we want to go ahead and divide by our leading coefficient, which would be 18. Now, the most important step is for you to reduce. Some of you are skipping this step. So we need to reduce our fractions. So looking at my first set of parentheses, I'm going to reduce 6 over 18, and I end up getting 1 over 3. So here I have y minus 1 over 3, and then I'm going to have y plus 15 over 18 is going to give me 5 over 6. So now that I have reduced my fractions, I am still left with fractions. So that now means that I have to do bottoms up. I'm going to take the bottom of my fraction and bring it up to the front of my binomial to get 3y minus 1. Looking at my second factor, again, going to do bottoms up. We end up with 6y plus 5. So that's my final answer for number 7. Let's go ahead and move on to another problem. Let's take a look at number 9. So number 9, we have 6x squared minus 26x minus 20. So again, first step, check for a GCF. We have menu 2-5, menu 2-5. And we're going to go ahead and type in 6, comma, -26 in the inside parentheses, step out, comma, -20. Pressing enter, we get back a GCF of 2. So because I get back a GCF of 2, this means I can then go ahead and divide every single term by 2. So 6x squared divided by 2 gives us 3x squared. -26x divided by 2 gives us -13x. -20 divided by 2 gives us -10. So we're going to go ahead and box in our GCF of 2, and we're going to save this for later. And we are focused on what is inside of the parentheses. So our next step, we're going to go ahead and slide and multiply. 3 times 10 gives us 30. So now we want to go ahead and list out factors of 30. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a graphing window, and we are going to type in 30 divided by x, press enter, and then Control T. So listing out my factors for 30, we have 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, and then 5 times 6. So now that we have listed out our factors, we want to go ahead and pay attention to the sign in front of C. Since this is negative, this means I'm looking for the two factors that subtract to give us 13, which are going to be 2 and 15. Now, our next step is to assign a sign to each factor. Remember, if we're subtracting, our signs are different. One is positive and one is negative. So we want to look at our middle term, negative 13. So remember, whatever the middle term is, whatever the sign for our middle term is, that goes to the larger factor when my signs are different. So here, that means that 15 is negative and 13 is positive. Guys, just do some mental math. If you take 2, a positive 2 and a negative 15, when you combine that, that gives us negative 13. If you had given the 2 the negative and the 15 the positive, you would have ended up with a positive 13. So now that we have identified our factors, we want to go ahead and set up 2 sets of parentheses. X goes at the beginning of both. And we are substituting in our 2 factors. Next step is to divide by our leading coefficient of 3. And now we want to reduce our fractions. So looking at my first set of parentheses, here I want to reduce 2 over 3. Well, 2 over 3 is already a reduced fraction. So from here, I'm actually going to go ahead and do bottoms up. I'm going to take the bottom of my fraction, bring it up to the front of my binomial to get 3x plus 2 as my first factor. Now looking at my second factor, we have 15 over 3, which gives us 5. So here, this is x minus 5. Now your last step, don't forget, is to drop down your GCF. And that is my final answer. Moving on, let's do one more problem together. Let's go ahead and check out number 10. So number 10, we have 2x squared minus 27x plus 5. So very first step, check for a GCF. I'm going to save us some time. I'm going to let you know there is not a GCF here. So our next step is going to be to slide and multiply. We are taking 10 times 5. 10 times 5 gives us 50. So now I want to list out factor pairs for 50. So in our graphs, I'm going to type in 50 divided by x, press enter, and then Control T. So here for my factor pairs, we have 1 times 50, 2 times 25, and lastly, 5 times 10. So now that I have my factor pairs listed, I want to go ahead and pay attention to the sign in front of C. Since it is positive, this means I'm looking for the 2 factors that add to give me 27, which are going to be 2 and 25. Now remember, because you are adding, this also means that your signs are the same. So they're either both positive or they are both negative. So we want to pay attention to our middle term now to determine our signs. We are trying to make 2 and 25 give us negative 27. Well, that means then that both of my factors should be negative then. So now I'm going to go and set up 2 sets of parentheses. X will go at the beginning of both, and I am substituting in those 2 factors. My next step is going to be to divide by our leading coefficient of 10, and now I reduce my fractions. So opening up a calculator window, we are dividing 2 by 10, and we end up with 1 over 5. So here this reduces to x minus 1 over 5. Times, now we have x minus 25 over 10, which is going to reduce to 5 over 2. So from here, our next step is to go ahead and do bottoms up. So I'm going to take the bottom of my fraction, bring it up to the front of my binomial, and I end up with 5x minus 1 times, again, doing bottoms up, I end up with 2x minus 5. So that is going to go ahead and complete the 3 questions I wanted to do with you. Again, if you have not completed factoring exercise A or exercise B from Monday and Tuesday, or factoring special cases from yesterday, please go ahead and complete those first before finishing this assignment.